Hello everyone, I am Demented Kirby, and welcome to my channel, the Commander Tavern. The Commander Tavern is a channel dedicated to my favorite Magic the Gathering format. The Brewery is a series on this channel showcasing my spicy brews and other deck techs. On this episode of the Brewery, I'll be discussing my take on a commander from Core Set 2021, Jolrael Mwonvuli Recluse. If you like this deck or any of the cards I'll be mentioning throughout the video, please consider using my TCG Player affiliate link when purchasing those cards. You can find that link down in the description. It'll really help out the channel. Other ways you can help support the channel is with my Patreon. Patrons get early access to scheduled videos on YouTube, and higher tier patrons get access to the VIP section of my Discord server as well. You can find a link to that down in the description too. In fact, patrons got a chance to see this video earlier. Alright, let's get back to the episode. Jolrael is a 1/2 human druid for 1 generic and 1 green. Being so cheap to cast means that we don't have to really worry that much about protecting her, since recasting her a couple of times per game won't really be an issue, especially in mono green. She has a triggered ability that creates a 2/2 cat creature token whenever you draw the second card each turn. This isn't that hard to pull off, especially in your own turn, since you start by drawing a card already in your draw step. However, it will also still trigger in opponent's turns, so ideally we want to find ways of drawing cards outside of our turn to potentially get as many cats as possible during an entire turn around the table. The reason we want as many draws as possible is because of her activated ability. For 4 generic and 2 green, all of your creatures become as big as the amount of cards in your hand. So if you've been drawing a lot throughout a turn, chances are that your creatures are going to be anywhere from 6 6s to 11 11s or even bigger when it comes time for you to swing in with them. And that is what the deck wants to do. We want to draw cards anyways, so it would seem like the cats are a bonus. However, we can also draw cards off of other things that happen naturally in a game, particularly interaction with opponents. This is the easiest and cheapest way to draw cards and create cats, since we'll be doing it during our opponent's turns. Farsight Mask draws us cards whenever we're dealt damage by things opponents control, so if they ping us twice in the same turn or we're hit by 2 creatures, not only will we draw 2 cards, but get that cat token. Even if we don't draw enough to get the cat, we're still able to draw between our turns. And if opponents are deterred because of it, it's still win-win because we're left alone. Likewise, Shaper's Sanctuary triggers whenever a creature we control becomes targeted by a spell or ability an opponent controls. Here, same as with Farsight Mask, we'll draw a card over interactions that already happen in Commander games. However, due to the synergy of the deck, it might become a deterrent instead in order to prevent us from drawing cards, creating cats, and getting a fat hand for Jolrael. So it's win-win for us yet again. Harwood Storyteller triggers for all the caster's opponents, but it includes us, which is important. Although this deck is not a group hug deck, this card is still great as a free way to draw cards when opponents are interacting in the game. For example, we draw an insane amount of cards during a counterspell war. Opponents do as well, but we can also take advantage of that too with cards like Mind's Eye. Even though the previous cards occurred for free, we need to pay 1 for each trigger. It's no matter since the deck does provide a ton of mana. It is mono green after all. On its own, Mind's Eye might not draw us enough in a turn to trigger Jolrael, but opponents also run card effects in their deck that allows them to draw, so it will trigger her more often than not, at least. In any case, you're paying 3 mana per turn to draw 3 cards, which isn't that bad in and of itself. Runic Armisar is another way we draw cards off of what opponents would be doing anyways. This one has the potential to draw way more than you would expect. There are plenty of creatures and lands with non-mana abilities that are staples in many decks, so it's quite possible to draw a bunch of cards per turn with this one also. It's also a 2/5, so it's a great blocker too. We can also draw cards outside of our turn by activating card drawing abilities. Endless Atlas, Sunset Pyramid, and Maze Mind Tome are cheap ways we can draw either during our turn to get that guaranteed second draw for a cat, or during an opponent's turn to also get that crucial second draw before their turn ends. Either way, if we don't get the cat, we're filling our hand. Costing 2 to cast and 2 to activate means that they have their limitations, but as far as the Pyramid and Tome are concerned, I'll soon show you an amazing trick to extend their usefulness, but we'll see that soon enough. Sensei's Divining Top is another all-star at drawing cards. If activated in response to our draw step, we can draw back into it and get a card for our trouble. We can then recast it and have it ready to do the same. Outside of our turn, it can also be used to get that second draw when needed in a pinch. It can also rearrange the top of our library, which is incredibly useful as well. Mikokoro, Center of the Sea, and Bonder's Enclave are lands we can activate to draw, just like we would with the previously mentioned artifacts. Mikokoro might help out opponents since the entire table draws a card, but if we have Mind's Eye out, then we have the potential of drawing 4 cards at instant speed for just 5 generic mana, which is nothing to scoff at. Seedborn Muse helps maximize these abilities even further. Being able to untap all of our permanents each turn means that we can activate these effects each turn and draw cards each turn, while also getting a cat token each turn. Not only that, but if we attack during our turn, we now get blockers the next turn, so it's definitely useful in the deck. Krosan Tusker and Yavimaya Elder also do an excellent job at drawing us cards outside of our turn, as well as getting us a lot of cards in our hand. We can cycle the Tusker to not only draw a card but get a basic land in our hand, essentially growing it by 2. However, the Elder takes it a step further. For less mana to activate, we get to draw a card and get 2 basic lands into our hand, growing it by 3. Now that I mentioned cycling, we can cycle away Blasted Landscape, Desert of the Indomitable, Slippery Karst, and Tranquil Thicket in a pinch to get that second draw in a turn. We might have to play them if we draw them way early in the game like our opening hand, but if we have to cycle them away, they essentially replace themselves so our hand stays the same size while triggering Jolrael. Symbiotic Deployment is an amazing card in this deck, but being so amazing means that it has a drawback. We skip our draw step which nombos with a couple of cards in the deck, but with enough creatures and tokens on the board, we can draw into a ton of cards, especially 2 cards each turn, getting us more casts to tap down for cards as well as a fat hand for Jolrael. This is more of a mid to late game card in order to help close out the game. Last but not least, Alhammarret's Archive is possibly the best way for us to draw 2 cards every turn with incredible ease. Due to its wording, any card we draw outside of our turn automatically counts, so if we just draw a single card in an opponent's turn, that becomes 2 and we get a cat token. Either way, in the grander scheme of things, it draws a tons of cards since it doubles all of our cantrips as well. It also doubles any life we gain as a bonus, but it's mostly here to maximize our drawing capabilities. Speaking of cantrips, what's the point of having a fat hand if we don't have any creatures to make huge to smash face with? Besides the first card we draw during our draw step, having Wall of Blossoms, Elvish Visionary, Cavern Corrugated, Generous Stray, or Llanowar Visionary enter the battlefield afterwards will net us a cat along with our extra card. Apart from the Wall and Corrugated, these can then become huge enough to attack with when we activate Jolrael, so they definitely pull their weight. We can also make any creature we cast into a cantrip thanks to Beast Whisperer and Primordial Sage. Any creature then becomes a cantrip when we cast them. This helps maximize what we're doing since we want bodies on the field as well as cards in our hand to get the most out of Jolrael. What's the point of having a massive hand if we have no creatures to pump? The Great Henge, Soul of the Harvest, and Guardian Project are even better yet since they trigger on the non-token creatures entering the battlefield instead of being cast. With some of the hijinks we're going to see in a bit, you'll see how we can maximize this even further by triggering these multiple times. As a bonus, the Great Henge also taps our mana and gives a +1/+1 counter to the creature entering the battlefield, making our beaters even bigger. Some of those hijinks come in the form of Blood Clock and Umbilicus. At the beginning of our upkeep, we have to bounce a permanent to our hand. Not only will this increase our hand for Jolrael, but we can bounce a creature to recast and get value from with, like one of the cantrips. We can also bounce Sunset Pyramid or Maze Mind Tome before they outlive their usefulness and thus reset them. Since this affects all players, we can also use this to disrupt opponents. If we see that opponents are playing strategies with effects that trigger when entering the battlefield, then we simply don't cast them, and keep them in our hand, which is not a problem anyways since we want lots of cards in our hand to begin with. Temur Sabertooth can accomplish the same thing but with our creatures and at instant speed for 2 mana. As a bonus, it gains indestructible when doing so. We can bounce a creature to protect it or just bounce a creature to draw cards from it afterwards. Either way, bouncing creatures makes our hand bigger, which is great for Jolrael. Taking this strategy even further, Yeva, Nature's Herald, gives our green creatures flash. That means that with enough mana we can bounce our cheap cantrippers and then cast them outside of our turn to potentially trigger Jolrael more often than not. We can also draw via combat itself thanks to Elder Gargaroth, Oakheim Adversary, and Oran Viper. Sure, the beast is more useful than for just drawing a card since it has other modes, and on its own it's a 6/6 with Vigilance, Reach, and Travel for 5 mana, but it's going to be used for drawing cards while it also smashes face. The Elf and Snake make opponents think twice about blocking with key creatures since they'll die after combat, so these will tend to draw us cards when entering the red zone. However, even better than all of these is Oran Frostfang since it essentially gives that effect to all of our attackers. Our attackers gain Death Touch and then we draw a card for each creature that connected. Bow of Nylea does the same in giving our attackers Death Touch while also providing a very useful activated ability with a modal effect. The deck has plenty more combat tricks besides Bow of Nylea since this is a Stompy deck after all, but we'll see those effects soon enough. But it's good to have a bit of redundancy. Solemn Simulacrum is another great card that can get us a card during combat. It ramps when it enters the battlefield and then we can send it into the red zone in the hopes of it dying in combat, or we can keep it untapped in order to kill it as a blocker. Sylvan Library is one of those cards that nombos with Symbiotic Deployment, but unlike that one, this one is golden to play early game. Not only can we get those cats quickly, but with enough life we can dig deeper. Either way, if we stay humble with its effect, we're still able to rearrange the top cards of our library. Throne of the High City does something similar but at the end of our turn if it makes us the Monarch. Maintaining the Monarch status is not that difficult to achieve since we should have more creatures and our tokens than the rest of the table, especially with the cat we'll create each turn thanks to the first card in our draw step and that crucial second card in our end step. Tireless Tracker and Nissa Vital Force help in turning our landfall into card draw. What's great about getting clue tokens is that we can sacrifice them at instant speed in any turn in order to draw cards off of them if we need to get that second draw. Nissa's emblem is incredible to get early on, but even then, if she sticks around, she also helps in untapping a land to either give mana acceleration or yet another beater. Ghost Town is a great land for taking advantage of this. Not only can we return it to our hand outside of our turn, but if we can get a landfall trigger from it each turn, we can take further advantage of these effects. Finally, Venser's Journal, Thought Vessel, and Reliquary Tower help us keep hands larger than 7. As a bonus, the journal has the potential of gaining us significant life, especially with Alhammer's Archive on the battlefield with it, and Thought Vessel on its own is a pretty good mana rock. So now that we're drawing into a ton of cards and amassing a huge army, how can we make it even more dangerous? Jolrael might make them huge, but they don't have any kind of evasion or way of breaking through. Nylea, God of the Hunt, and Thunderfoot Bailiff help with just that. They give both our creatures trample, and while Nylea is a great mana sink, the Bailiff gives our entire army +2/+2 for free so long as we control Jolrael. Having a huge trampling army is definitely a great way to close out a game. And just in case Jolrael is taken out, Beastmaster Ascension can pick up the slack. It will always give +5/+5 so long as it has 7 quest counters on it, which isn't a problem since we'll be attacking with a bunch of creatures anyways. Eldrazi Monument is amazing here since we can always just sacrifice a token to it each upkeep to keep it around. Giving our army +1/+1 flying and indestructible is no joke in an aggressive deck like this one. It provides both an offensive boost as well as a defensive one. We'll see the rest of the responses in the deck soon, but for the moment this pulls so much weight in the deck. We can also still have fatties in the form of Sylvan Yeti, Maro, and Masumaro First to Live, just in case we don't have Jolrael. Each of these creatures will be huge, but with Trample will definitely take out a huge chunk of their life. Fun fact, Sylvan Yeti has been printed with 2 different creature types, each of which isn't its Oracle creature type. It is a Yeti, not a beast nor elemental, so keep that in mind. Parallel Lives and Doubling Season help in doubling and potentially quadrupling our cat production, thus making our army larger. Doubling Season also doubles the quest counters on Beastmaster Ascension, getting it online faster. It also doubles the +1/+1 counters that the Great Henge and Oran Reef the Vastwood put on our creatures. The Vastwood is great to activate after getting plenty of creatures onto the battlefield in order to make them scarier. Jolrael makes them XX, but the +1/+1 counters are added to that since it's not an overlap. Earlier I mentioned discussing the responses of the deck, and what's great about them is that, until we use them, they'll be taking up space in our hand, which is something that Jolrael will love since it helps her make our army huge. Wilt, Barrier Breach, and Force of Vigor are great against Pillow Fort effects, which can be a nuisance to Stompy decks like ours. And if we aren't facing against such decks, we can cycle them away to get some draws, or better yet, use them against mana rocks to slow down our opponents. Acidic Slime takes it a step further by also taking out a land, which can not only set opponents back, but also take out oppressive lands or lands that are too broken like Gaia's Cradle, etc. Song of the Dryads and Beast Within take it even further by getting rid of absolutely any permanent. In the case of Beast Within at instant speed, the controller will get a 3/3 beast for their troubles, but that's nothing compared to our horde of huge creatures. Song of the Dryads is especially oppressing at neutralizing an opponent's commander. Same with Kenrith's Transformation, which also draws us a card. In any other deck that might just be a nice bonus, but in this deck it's more than just a bonus, as we've seen so far. Although the deck's running Eldrazi Conscription, that's not enough. Heroic Intervention and Rapid Vigor further help against board wipes that can really set us back. Although the deck has shown other ways of resilience and getting around them, these are best kept in our hand to not only keep it large, but to also only use when absolutely necessary. Lastly, the deck being mono-green means that it suffers no shortage of mana acceleration. The deck has Rampant Growth, Nature's Lore, and 3 Visits to help get to that 3rd forest on turn 2. Sure, they compete on curve with Jolrael, but they help get us ahead a turn. Besides, Jolrael is better cast after we've gotten a means to draw cards out first. What's great about the latter two is that they can get Dryad Arbor for being a forest, so we have a land that will enjoy all the pumps the rest of the creatures get. Being a land makes it a bit harder to interact with, which is also a plus, even though it's more a mana dork than anything. That being said, Llanowar Elves, Finhorn Elves, Elvish Mystic, and Birds of Paradise are the other mana dorks of the deck, the birds being especially useful since they have flying, which is relevant evasion. In order to diversify our mana sources, Sol Ring is included in the deck. Jolrael might be cheap to cast, but her ability is quite costly to activate. Besides, we're constantly activating other effects, so Sol Ring is a great way to hasten that process. We can also just reduce the cost of our spells altogether with Emerald Medallion. This is better than a mana rock since it essentially gives us 1 generic mana for each green spell we're casting, which is better than just tapping a rock for 1 colorless mana, at least in mono-green decks like this one. Speaking of the benefits of mono-green decks, Gaia's Cradle and Nykthos Shrine to Nyx provide an insane amount of mana here. Either one of these alone might be enough to activate Jolrael's ability without having to worry too much about available mana. If you don't already own a Gaia's Cradle but it's outside of your budget, you can always just try and get the gold-bordered version of it, which is practically pennies to the dollar in comparison. As for the rest of the lands, the deck's running Ancient Tomb and 19 snow-covered forests in case anyone is running anything that benefits us for it. Fortunately, this mana base is more than satisfactory for this kind of deck since it's enough to cast our spells and activate our effects. This brew is just an idea of how to build around Jolrael, Mwonvuli Recluse. I went against the grain when brewing this deck since I'm taking the most advantage out of everything that happens in a multiplayer Commander game, not just what I'm doing. I wanted to maximize those effects by tapping into my opponent's actions as well. This allows me to essentially play during their turns and making their decisions even more difficult when it concerns interacting with me. That way I can continue amassing my army and increasing my hand until the moment comes to strike. This also provides ways of being bothersome to opponents as well as controlling them a bit and forcing your influence on their decisions, thus punishing them regardless. Their choice is becoming suffering more or suffering less. If you're interested in the decklist of this spicy brew of mine, you can find a link to it down in the description. I would like to thank all my patrons for supporting me and a quick shout out to all my higher tier patrons, the brewers, for their patronage. I'd also like to thank anyone using my TCG Player affiliate link. That also helps out the channel. And to everyone, thanks for watching this episode of the Brewery on the Commander Tavern. I am Demented Kirby and happy brewing.